Essentially, the constriction, limitation of this physical world is a limitation. It's limited, it's not infinite. And then eventually a physical Mitzrayim. So from the Meitzah, from the constriction of the highest level in the chain of creation, it resulted directly, indirectly, but basically this is the source that in the system it later resulted that it came down in a spiritual limitation, and then in a physical limitation, and then in a physical country which is called Mitzrayim, which means constriction. This is how it is in the higher worlds, where it all starts from. The word Meitzah, the word Tzimtzum, which means limitation. Chassidus explains, the Rebbe mentions it quite often, that in Torah we also find certain limitation. What is the limitation in Torah? Torah is the wisdom of Hashem. So the Rebbe says when we look in the Jewish law, so there is two different facets. There's one, the law as it is stated in the code of the Jewish law. This is called Shuras Hadin, the line of the law. Then there is a level which is more than the line of the law. This is something that is beyond the line of the law. What is that called? The ethics of our fathers. Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos is called Milsa da Chasidusa. A person is doing something which is more than required. Like Chasidus. Chasidus is something that enhances the person, refines the person to a higher standard. And this is also in regards to Torah. In Torah itself you have restriction. Torah says this and not different. But then a person could extend it further and do more. Take upon themselves to do more than requested, than stated in the law. So the Rebbe says one is called Shuras Hadin. One is the line of the law. The other one is called Lifnim Shuras Hadin, past the line of the law. One is called Mitzrayim, Meitzah, Gvul, border. This is basically the line of the law. And then there's something that's past it, which means a person goes out from those limitations. So in a sense, when a person is doing more than Torah requires from him, than the Jewish law requires from him, he is actually in a level, in a spiritual level, fulfilling Torah mitzvahs on the level of leaving the exile of Egypt, leaving the limitations in a spiritual sense. Doing more than the line of the law requires from him. This is how Mitzrayim is found in Torah, and how we also have Yetzias Mitzrayim in Torah. So the basic part of leaving Egypt we're going to actually discuss further. This is just that in Torah itself they go together. There's the line of the law and then there's beyond that. Now we're going to discuss how we find it in a person, how every person has it in themselves. And on a personal level, it takes place every day. A person has intellect and emotions. Between the intellect and emotions, there needs to be a buffer. There needs to be a buffer which should change the process from an intellect process to a emotional process. What is the reason for that? Because they are two opposites. Intellect and emotions are two opposites. Intellect, the nature of intellect is to connect to higher. A person, the more he becomes the more information he gets, the more intelligent he becomes. If he's a person that has a certain modesty, he feels humble in his eyes. How much he sees, how much he reaches in his knowledge. This, in a sense, brings out a certain humbleness, a certain bittul, as the difference between the Rambam and Aristotle. Aristotle, Maimonides, the Rambam. The Rambam was one that the more he knew, the more humble he became. The more he felt small in his own eyes. Aristotle is exactly the opposite. The more he knew, he felt more self-esteem. He felt more dignified that he is the one that can prove this, he is the one that can prove that. He can explain it logically. What is the difference? Because when it comes to intelligence, that is based and is when a person delves into sacred matters, it just brings out a state of nullification, a state of awareness, state of consciousness of something higher than him, higher than the person, and therefore it brings out a humbleness and a certain step backward for knowing what he is starting to learn and know and see and becoming aware of. On the other hand, when it comes to midas emotions, emotions are basically loud. They're loud, they express themselves in a very strong way. A person wants a certain thing and he has an affection for something, he has a love for something, he has an ava for something. He speaks up. He speaks up and he really wants it with a very strong feeling. When a person is afraid of something, so the fear is also something which is in the opposite direction, but it's also something which is very obvious that the person is fearing something, is dreading something. It is something that has a very strong effect on the person. On the other hand, another example actually between the difference between the intellect and the emotions are, the intellect is something that a person is removed from people around him. The more he gets involved in his own studies, in his own research, in different deep philosophical concepts, he prefers to have it quiet around him, prefers to be secluded in a certain sense in order that he should be able to concentrate better and be more successful in discovering and exploring what he's working on. Emotions, Hasidus says, is something that he needs to have people around him. He needs to share the emotions with them, and especially when he expresses it in a practical sense. Expressing it in a practical